few years ago, Outbreak Festival, a popular hardcore festival in the UK, announced the first few acts in the lineup for their 2023 event. Among the list were the usual suspects you'd come to expect, like Speed, Zulu, and Trapped Under Ice. But it was the headliners that caught everybody by surprise. Denzel Curry and Death Grips. Without a doubt, two great hip-hop acts, but their headlining spots sparked debate. Did they truly belong at what was widely regarded as a hardcore punk festival? And that got me thinking. On the surface level, hardcore and hip-hop seem worlds apart, but when you stop and listen, you find that these two genres share a lot more in common than you might think. But just how close are hardcore and hip-hop? Let's take a look. Lads, I'll be honest. As a kid, I was never into rap and hip hop. I was that one emo kid in school who listened to screamo music, scoffing at those who couldn't tell the difference between My Chemical Romance and Fall Out Boy, and side-eyeing anyone that liked rap. I couldn't comprehend how anyone could like both rap and metal. One consisted of screaming over distorted guitars, and the other was, well, basically just talking. But as I grew older, and I explored more music, I started going to more shows and I discovered artists like Kendrick Lamar and Logic. I really started to appreciate the music and what it stood for. Lyrics focusing on social commentary with an anti-establishment attitude, and this sort of rebellious nature that both hardcore and hip-hop artists shared. Obviously, not all hip-hop and rap artists shared this same ethos, opting for more commercial sounds about money and drugs and hoes. Their words, not mine. But this isn't about shared attitudes. The further you look back, you realise that they both brewed from the same pot. So let's go way back to where it all began, amongst the chaos of the 1970s. Now, back in the 70s and 80s, there was this sort of urban decay happening in cities all over America. Cities like New York, Washington, and LA were all experiencing significant economic decline, with deindustrialization and rising unemployment creating environments of poverty and crime. Urban life back then wasn't all cheesecake and roses. The Bronx was quite literally on fire, the factories shut down, and the people were just left behind. Unemployment in New York alone was at 13%, and it was believed to be even higher in the Bronx specifically. People were literally destroying their own property to claim its insurance value. The kids needed an outlet. They faced a lack of opportunity, systemic racism, and police brutality. The youth felt like the system had abandoned them, and out of anger and frustration, they turned to art, and thus hip-hop and hardcore were born. Hardcore and hip-hop were born in community-driven spaces. Hardcore was being played in basements and small clubs, whereas hip-hop began with block parties in the Bronx, turning these local gatherings into cultural movements. New York in particular became this sort of melting pot. As JPEG Mafia put it, back in the early 80s, rappers couldn't perform in the fancy venues, thanks to racism, so the punk clubs would let them in to perform. Clubs like CBGB and the Roxy would host a hardcore punk show one night and then a hip-hop act the next, bringing these audiences together. Punk and hardcore's openness attracted diverse voices, especially from black musicians. There are artists like Bad Brains, a vegan reggae punk band that bridged these two musical styles, setting a precedent for embracing multiple genres. Their energetic stage presence and rebellious ethos resonated with both punk and hip-hop fans alike. Then early hip-hop pioneers like African Bambaataa came along and drew inspiration from the punk's ethos of rebellion, who later on would record a song called World Destruction with Sex Pistols' very own Johnny Rotten, paving the way for cross-pollination with hip-hop for years to come. Take Biohazard, for example. They're a Brooklyn hardcore band who have constantly blurred the lines throughout their career. Their most popular track, Punishment, on the album Urban Discipline, delivers rap-style verses over some heavy riffs, showing how these genres collided. Then on that same album was their track Shades of Grey, which was not named after the smut, but instead was a song that echoed the social frustrations both hardcore and hip-hop shared, all whilst being delivered on rap vocal cadences and down-tuned guitars. The crossover wasn't just musical, it was cultural. Both scenes embraced graffiti art, streetwear, and a DIY attitude that rejected mainstream norms. That same spirit of rebellion and ingenuity continues to inspire modern hardcore and hip-hop acts alike, and we're still seeing this today when we look at beatdown hardcore bands, for example. However, we can't talk about hardcore and hip-hop without talking about a specific group in particular. A group of boys that grew up and experienced everything that I'm talking about. I'm, of course, talking about the B-Boys.
Oh my God, we're back again.
No, not them. I said the B-Boys.
We get down, we make you move.
No, not the actual the Beastie Boys. I'm talking about the Beastie Boys.
I have a series actually of kind of like softcore sex novels.
Now, I think it's common knowledge by now that the Beastie Boys started out as a hardcore punk band. In 1982, they released their EP, Pollywog Stew, 8 tracks of just pure hardcore energy. However, even then, you could still hear the hip-hop influence they'd soon fully embrace, especially in tracks like Jimmy. By 1986, the Beastie Boys released License to Ill, and the result was groundbreaking. The album featured heavy guitar riffs and rap vocals on tracks like No Sleep Till Brooklyn and Fight For Your Right, yet also featured hip-hop beats throughout. They'd fully merged hardcore with New York's thriving hip-hop scene. However, it wasn't without backlash. Hip-hop was very much an underground movement, thought to be too black for mainstream America, but in the end, it was 3 Jewish boys that brought it to the masses. Then back in 1995, they released Aglio e Olio, another 8-song EP of nothing but hardcore punk. The group was so open with their roots, you never really knew what their songs were going to sound like until they dropped. They embraced the rebellious ethos of both genres, attracting fans from both sides, with the Beastie Boys making it clear that punk and hip-hop could coexist, paving the way for artists who didn't want to fit neatly into one genre. But the Beastie Boys weren't the only ones pushing boundaries. As the 80s moved on into the 90s, the punk rappers kept on coming. We had Run DMC and Public Enemy. Although hip-hop groups, their lyrics and ethos were certainly on that punk side, with Public Enemy even releasing a song with thrash metal band Anthrax. This fusion of rap and thrash metal was revolutionary at the time, and the instrumental definitely pays homage to New York hardcore's sound. There's also that Run DMC song with Aerosmith, but that's not important. And the cross-pollination didn't stop there, when in 1993 a film called Judgment Day was released. The soundtrack featured a bunch of metal bands creating songs with hip-hop artists. At the time, rap metal hadn't really been a thing, but that was soon about to change. All of this paved way for bands like Rage Against the Machine and Limp Bizkit. Whilst not hardcore bands, they clearly drew from the aggressiveness of hardcore and the rhythmic vocal styles of hip-hop. As we crossed into the 2000s, Linkin Park released the collaborative EP Collision Course with Jay-Z, a fusion of the two's most popular songs, which at the time divided critics. However, I think it's some of the most fun music released from the pair. I know none of this is strictly about hardcore, but I just find it so fascinating that this whole butterfly effect occurred due to what was going on back in the 70s and 80s. Nu metal was essentially born out of it. But nu metal wasn't the end of the story. What really kept these genres alive wasn't just the studio collaborations. It was the energy of their live performances. On stage, hardcore punk and hip-hop created a space where fans could let loose, speak out and connect. And when you see them live, you realise they're not so different. Hardcore punk shows are all about chaos, the moshing, the stage dives, the sweat. It's a release. And at hip-hop shows, you've got the cyphers, the call and response, the energy. There are so many parallels between the two. At their best, both are about breaking down barriers and building something real. Throughout history, we've seen the two together sharing the same stage, whether that's the Beastie Boys opening for Bad Brains, or Anthrax and Public Enemy touring together. We've had Denzel Curry support Korn in London, who later pulled out on the same day to play with the Suicide Boys. I was there. I was fuming. Now, Outbreak Festival is keeping that history and connection live and true. Plus, Zulu just opened for Jizza, which is insane to me. I have no idea how Wu-Tang fans react to a power violence band, but it's still so cool to see. And it's not slowing down anytime soon. Fast forward to today and we're still seeing that DIY tradition that hardcore lives and breathes is still going strong within hip-hop. The rise of platforms like SoundCloud and Bandcamp has made it easier for artists to blend genres. SoundCloud rap in particular owes much to punk's lo-fi DIY ethic, with artists recording raw, unpolished tracks that resemble punk's early days. Now we're seeing a rise to punk rap artists like JPEG Mafia, Rico Nasty, and of course, Denzel Curry, all creating art that sounds like hip-hop, but the lyrics and what the music stands for is more of a 21st century protest than it was back in the Reagan era. It's punk music, except instead of guitars, it's 808 drum beats. Then on the other side, we're seeing rap punks with artists like Scarlord and Ghostmane, fusing hardcore's raw aggression with heavy bass lines and trap beats, rapping about personal struggles. It all comes full circle. We have hardcore bands to this day embracing the genre's relationship with hip-hop, whether that's down to the clothes and aesthetic or incorporating hip-hop elements into their actual music. Turnstile have collaborated with hip-hop producers in the past and brought these beats and grooves into their sound, most notably on their singles Share a View and New Heart Designs. These 3-track EPs are a collaborative effort between the band and producers Mall Grab, Bad Bad Not Good and Blood Orange. Although essentially hip-hop and jazz remixes of Turnstile's songs, it's vastly different from what we're used to hearing from the group, yet it is proof that hardcore can evolve without losing its meaning. On top of that, there's Soul Glow, a post-hardcore band from Philadelphia. Their songs confront the personal and political, reflecting punk and hip-hop groups since its inception, whilst also embracing an extreme metal sound, yet they always find room for funk and hip-hop amongst all the noise, with many of their songs featuring artists from the rap scene. Even in the UK, we have bands like Ironed Out and Gassed Up embracing the grime sound that's extremely popular over here. But we also had one group that I absolutely loved, Asteroid Boys. Although you could say they're more of a rap rock group, when they dropped their debut EP Bacon Dream, it set the UK hardcore Facebook groups into a frenzy. The sound felt so different, even though we'd already had bands like Hacktivist around at the same time. Maybe it's because they leaned very heavily into their grime backgrounds, except the guitars and drums were extremely reminiscent of a beatdown band. And finally, we have Joey Valance and Bray. In 2024, they dropped one of my favourite records of the year. They're not a hardcore band, yet they embrace their ethos fully. Everything they produce is written by them, recorded by them, and distributed by them. They are DIY through and through, and it still sounds unbelievably polished. Now, let's not beat around the fanny here. Their resemblance to 90s hip-hop is uncanny, sounding similar to Beastie Boys both musically and lyrically. However, they're definitely a duo I would consider hardcore adjacent. The closing songs off their debut album are fully inspired by 80s hardcore punk, and they literally have a song titled Punk Tactics, as if it couldn't be any more obvious. This DIY ethos that they've adopted is the literal embodiment of the meaning behind the genres in the first place. And if that wasn't enough, they've played festivals all over, including Download and Slam Dunk. And Fred Durst even invited them out to open for Limp Bizkit in London. Of course, on the surface level, hardcore and hip-hop appear to be on complete opposite ends of the spectrum. But when you stop to listen, then there is an obvious synergy between them all. There's an energy in live performance and the delivery of lyrics of defiance and creativity that resonate with those who choose to listen. If you know, you know. And if you don't, then open your mind a little. I've been James. Like and subscribe if you've enjoyed. Thanks for watching.